Kansas beating number 6 BYU, handing the Cougars their first loss of the season, 17-13 in a late night game. Start off with the highest graded Jayhawks in this one. Their highest graded player was offensive tackle Bryce Cabeldew with a 79.9 grade. Linebacker J.B. Brown is next at a 76.9. Marvin Grant, 75.3. Dean Miller, 73.9. Luke Grimm, 71.3. And then Jalen Daniels, the quarterback, at a 70.6. Let's go over to BYU with their highest graded player, starting off with cornerback Jacob Robinson, 77.8. Raider Damouni, 74.9. Harrison Taggart, the linebacker, 74.2. Tyler Batty, 72.6. Tanner Wall, the safety, 71.2. And then our guy Jake Retzloff with a 68.8 grade. So Dalton, in BYU's first loss of the season, what was the total story?
So I had a gut feeling this could happen, right? And I even picked it on Tuesday. But the way I thought it was going to happen if Kansas was going to win this game is that Jalen Daniels would come out and dominate like he did against Iowa State. He had 5 big-time throws in that game. I thought it would be a shootout, and Kansas just went in and outscored them. That didn't prove to be the case. Actually, Kansas, outside of a couple sequences, the first drive of the game, obviously the Jalen Daniels punt that turned things upside down late in the game. But I think, for me, this is a game actually of BYU and missed opportunities. They easily could have won this game. And first of all, let's start with this. By no means is BYU's season over. They still control their own destiny. I think the only thing they lost here was probably an opportunity to get an at-large. Yeah. Our 12-0 and then 12-1 scenario.
And I tweeted this out last night. This game confirmed the Big 12 would only be getting one team in the playoff now.
Yeah.
It's you either win the Big 12 or you're not making the playoff.
That's where we're at. And BYU now, especially, look, and we've been saying Kansas is better than their record. But the committee's still going to look at this and go, well, you lost to a 4 or 5 or maybe a 6-win team at the end of this all, right? So especially in the Big 12, where obviously I think it's been I would argue it's been the most disrespected conference as far as the rankings go, and they're just, we know how it is now with the SEC and the Big 10, okay? But either way, missed opportunities for BYU. Red zone, 4 red zone trips, no touchdowns, okay? The kicks.
Really, Penn State?
Well, this is how these games can be lost, especially tight defensive games. If you don't go from 0s and 3s to 7s, then you've got a problem. 4 red zone trips, 2 field goals, the interception on the goal line fade at the end of the first half. That really, that was a deflating.
It happened last week too, didn't it?
On a 2-point conversion, it did.
Yeah.
And they're throwing to a tight end against Mello Dotson, one of the best corners in the country. I'm just not sure.
And Retzloff's like you said it to me last time we were watching the game together. Like, he's just not accurate in those throws. That's just not his. It's not really in his toolbox.
The goal line fades. I really don't understand why most teams still do it. That's not just a BYU thing.
It's one of the least efficient plays in football.
Yeah, it only gets completed like 24% of the time or something. But okay, so you had that, and then you had the series at the end of the game where they worked their way inside the 20 on a potential game-winning drive, and a speed option on 3rd down, then a false start, then a 4th and 11, and 4th and 11 is a hell of a lot harder than 4th and 6. But I want to highlight the fact that this red zone problem is not just this week. It's actually their last 3 games, okay? The UCF game, and then the tight game last week with Utah. They're not finishing drives, okay? Weeks 1 through 8, BYU was 38th in the country in red zone offense grade and 20th in EPA per play. Somewhere between above average and very good in the red zone for most of this season. Their last 3 weeks in the red zone, they're 131st in offensive grade and 127th in EPA per play. They are working just fine between the 20s, and they're not finishing drives. And anytime you're not finishing drives, these are the types of upsets that can happen. It almost happened last week against Utah, and they obviously pulled a miracle at the end, and it certainly happened last night against Kansas. When you go 0 for 4 in the red zone, you leave the door open to lose a close game like this. So I think that's where BYU look to. I think fundamentally there's a whole lot of things wrong with them, and because people are freaking, I'm sure there's people freaking out. Look, the frauds are exposed, this and that. No, they're still really darn good. But even if you're really darn good, and if you're not finishing drives, I see at least one game like this every week, whether it's on our show here or on the Monday show with Trevor with the NFL. There's one game every single week where I go, this team didn't finish drives, and they lost because of it. This week it was BYU. They had every opportunity to win this game, something like 28-17 or 28-13, and they just didn't finish drives. If you don't finish drives, it is what it is. I do find interesting, though, that Retzloff even said after this game. And because I blared the sirens all week on this, right? And I think that the spreads in Vegas were blaring the sirens. Everybody was talking about, why is Kansas only a 3-point dog? They're good. They're a good team with a bad record, right? And Retzloff had said, he goes, yeah, we didn't have a great week of practice. We didn't have the most attention to detail. He said it right after the game, and I go, these are the things you can't overlook because teams are coming in here hungry. Kansas is still trying to get into a bowl game. They know they've lost a lot of these types of games, these tight games where earlier in the season they probably give up the losing touchdown on the last drive. You have to respect every opponent you play. And if you don't do that, these are the things that just little details. Again, a goal line fade play call where a bad ball is thrown, or the end of the game where a false start really probably hurts you because fourth and 6,
the Jalen Daniels
or
punt.
a Jalen Daniels punt where things just get kind of weird. Like, these are the little things that can happen, and these are the things that it takes for an upset to happen. So we didn't get here the way I thought we would get here, but I think it's a day of missed opportunities for BYU, especially in the red zone.
It absolutely is, honestly. And my sense of the story is Jake Retzloff, a 51 passing grade against the Blitz. Exactly what I talked about in the preview, Dalton, was that entering the week, Retzloff had the 6th best passing grade in the country when there wasn't a blitz. He's 115th when there is a blitz. Because he told us in the interview, because we actually asked him that question, like, hey, you have like one of the best passing grades in the country when there's not a blitz. Like, what is it about a standard rush that you just love going against? He goes, it's so easy to diagnose what coverage they're in. He's like, I know exactly what they're going to do, and I know how to beat it then. But when there is a blitz, obviously defenses disguise coverages a lot more when they do that. And he confuses him a little bit, obviously. And it confused him yesterday against Kansas. He 6 for 10, 79 yards, and that interception in the end zone, Dalton, was also on a blitz as well. So only a 51 passing grade, a 45.4 passer rating. Now, Kansas didn't blitz him a lot, and that was something I talked about in the preview as well, is like Kansas does not blitz that often. They probably should do it a little bit more. They only blitzed him on 10 of his 31 dropbacks. It wasn't like they blitzed him a lot in this game, but it still got the job done against Retzloff, honestly. He played well, honestly, when there wasn't a blitz either. So speeding up Retzloff works. Like, he has improved in so many ways this year, but the one area he's still kind of struggling with this year is when there's pressure and when there's a blitz. When the defenses do really try to speed him up, he's not as good right now. So I think that's kind of the game plan that a team like Arizona State should employ next week against BYU. It's like, hey, let's get after this guy. Let's make sure he does not have time to diagnose, because he's a very, very intelligent quarterback. But if you speed him up, even the smartest quarterbacks in the world, they speed up, and they're not as good when you speed them up, honestly. So I think Jake Retzloff against the blitz and under pressure, it's been an issue all year, and it was an issue last night against Kansas.
Yeah, and the last few weeks, their pass protection hasn't been quite as good as it was earlier in the year either. Their last 3 games are their 3 lowest pass blocking grades of the season, and that plays a part in it too. Is the more you blitz and the more funky looks you throw at offensive lines, and this is an offensive line that has dealt with some injuries. You know, they got to communicate. They got to pick these things up. It's part of having that continuity up front, is to pick up those blitzes. So all the way around, I think it's something they have to get better at as a unit.
Yeah, and Jalen Daniels, by comparison, so Retzloff was 51.6. Jalen Daniels is like a 90 passing grade against the blitz like last night. He had a great game, and I almost went with him for my most impressive part of this Kansas victory, but I didn't. Dalton, who did you go with, though, for most impressive part?
I actually stayed on the BYU side. I thought the run defense was spectacular in this game. A 78.5 team run defense grade. They only allowed 78 yards on 32 carries and 1 explosive run. And you're talking about 2 guys, especially in Devin Neal and Jalen Daniels himself, who can really hurt you. And their defense, I thought BYU's defense was spectacular in this game. Outside of the first drive, and again, the sequence where you had the Jalen Daniels punt that went off a BYU player and Kansas recovered and kind of got a fluky touchdown out of that. But I thought BYU's defense was plenty well good enough to win this game. And they've been really good all year, especially against the run in some of these bigger games. I thought they were against Kansas State. They were spectacular. This game, I mean, I think still the same keys hold, right, is for me in the Big 12. What have I said all year? Run defense and quarterbacks. They just got to help their quarterback out a little bit more, protect him a little better, figure out a plan for these blitzes. And look, BYU, they still control their own destiny, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if they keep playing defense like this, they just finish drives, they could still very well win the Big 12. This is a setback. It's a setback when it comes to, you're not going to get an at-large bid now. It's just not going to happen. The SEC, it's going to be loaded with SEC teams and all of that. But it's all right in front of them. You bounce back. You got a tough game next week, and we're going to go over the team they're playing. But it's still right there. You get 3 wins, you're going to the playoff.
Absolutely. My most impressive part, I wanted to go Jalen Daniels, but I actually found something different, Dalton. The Kansas coverage unit was really good yesterday. 77.4 coverage grade as a team, 192 yards allowed, had an interception, 3 forced incompletions. Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson, the top 2 corners for Kansas, only allowed 55 yards all game between the 2 of them. And of the 8 defensive players who played at least 15 coverage snaps, 6 of them earned coverage grades above a 65. There wasn't really anyone special that was outstanding yesterday in coverage, but they just played great team football, did not make many mistakes on the back end, and most impressive part, Dawn, I mentioned before how Retzlaff, under pressure and when blitzed, he's not as good. They actually didn't get him under pressure that much. He was only under pressure on 9 of his 31 dropbacks, and usually when that happens, he will pick defenses apart. Not Kansas, though. Their coverage unit really came to play yesterday, so I want to shout them out as my most impressive part of the victory for them.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I told you. I mean, Dotson and Bryant, it was a really good matchup against Chase Roberts and Darius Lassiter, and for the most part, they got the better of it.
I just want to shout out Jalen Daniels as well. He had like an 80-plus passing grade. The numbers didn't look great, but 80-plus passing grade, and then also the punt at the end that went off a BYU player, a muff punt that ended up going to Kansas, and they scored a touchdown right after that. Then obviously that didn't happen. They wouldn't have won the game. So Jalen Daniels, not only as the quarterback of the team, but also as special teamer a little bit as well, getting the a huge punt for them as well. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.